Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, freaks and geeks alike, to another episode of the Creepypasta Power Hour. Today we've got a special story. I'm sure you've heard the term Trollpasta before, and if you have, you'd imagine a story like The Yellow Devil, the original Sonic.exe, Tails Doll, among many other terrible stories. If you're expecting that today, you'll be sorely disappointed. I Hate You was a trollpasta written by Slime Beast as a sort of parody of video game creepypastas. In my opinion, when it's viewed through the lens of a parody, it works a lot better because when it's taken at face value, it's just another cliche, but well-written story. With that said, let's get into it. This isn't one of those haunted game stories. At no point are you going to hear me claim something within the game spoke to me, reacted to my words, or forced me to punch myself repeatedly in the face. No, this isn't about a haunted game or a game doing something impossible, or even it shouldn't have. This isn't about a glitch or a hidden satanic message. At no time did I phone Nintendo headquarters only to have my questions answered with hushed whispers and anguished screams. This story is about a game feature I don't think anyone else has unlocked. That's it. No ghosts, no conspiracies, just a secret we were all meant to find but never did. Something that changed an entire generation's childhood and the very essence of a multi-million-dollar franchise. This is about what I assume to be previously undiscovered alternate ending of Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo. In 1996, I received my first computer as a birthday gift. I had been on the internet before, had used computers before, but had always been in school or at a friend's house. This one was mine. All mine. I explored the crude, prehistoric web of the time with great interest, and I downloaded all sorts of pornography, and even printed it out, which makes absolutely no sense. This is where I first discovered Mario World. I never had a Super Nintendo as a little kid, so it was all new to me. I downloaded a ton of games along with the Super Nintendo emulator, but Mario World was my favorite. For over a decade, the same Mario World ROM was my time-wasting hobby. I played it over and over again, beating the game faster and faster until I began to lazily explore the worlds with no particular purpose. Game Genie codes helped immensely. I could turn off the timer and relive a particularly entertaining map for an hour as I waited for a download or any number of boring events. It was in this manner that I must have beaten and rebeaten the game thousands of times. There is a comfort in the obsessive-compulsive behavior of this routine. But all this was shattered when I saw the Blind Boo. The Blind Boo, as I referred to it, was hovering over the exit of the haunted sunken ship level later on in the game. I call it blind because it actually had no visible eyes. It was like someone had made a lazy ROM hack, but I knew from years upon years of experience that this was the normal game. The Blind Boo just hung above the exit pipe, blocking it. I turned my back on it, but it didn't chase me. How could it? It didn't even see me. Then I noticed something else out of sorts. There's a key and a keyhole misplaced above the exit. Keys and keyholes are such ways of ending a level in an alternate manner and discovering a secret area. Still, this didn't belong there, and I knew it. For a moment, I considered I broke the ROM file from overuse. After taking a screenshot to specifically show all you Mario Bros. Fans out there, I picked up the key and opened the door, figuring the game would seize up and I'd have to restart. Instead, it opened a new path to the level selection screen. A whirlpool next to Bowser's already creepy cave head thing. I pressed the right and moved on to the whirling drain. Oh god, no. This didn't really strike me as odd because if you're familiar with the Mario world, there's an area called Star Road that you may know have similar names, just the stuff like tubular, awesome, and all manner of dumb words and phrases. Most of the areas were called Vanilla Forest 1 and Donut Mountain 3 and all that, but there were levels with odd names like that. What did concern me though was Mario's expression. Surprise, shock, fear? I entered the map. Oddly enough, the whirlpool in the middle of the lake began with the standard castle entry animation. Mario walked up to the door, looked up, then went in. You could tell it was underwater because of the bubbles that periodically emerged from the sprite's mouth and floated to the top of the screen. Inside the castle, it started to look more like I was experiencing a glitch of sorts. There's no room to jump, no room to do anything but hold left and right. I must have gone right for 10 to 20 minutes just holding B and running at full speed. After a while I ran into one or two blind boos in the darkness above, then 3 or 4, then the screen was full of them. They just kind of hung there, doing nothing. They wouldn't chase me if I turned my back, as with the previous blind boo. If I made any noise, like Mario's jump, they would shudder a bit, like they heard the sound of Mario's movements but couldn't do anything about it. Then something made me stop and turn the other way. Now I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt this map was designed specifically to fuck with the player, not because of the giant bleeding bill with hemorrhaging profusely from its face, but because it was inescapable. I'm sorry, but that was a weird sentence. That is, unless you're like me and have Game Genie cheats on hand. I switched to the code for permanent invincibility. I let the bleeding bill chase me for a while when I was invincible just to get a good look at the thing. I stopped and killed it with my invulnerable touch. Only when I saw a message that hadn't been there when I'd passed before. I hate you. That creeped me out, but on the other hand it was interesting because it meant this map was meant to exist. There is some sort of plot element here, something undiscovered. What did it mean? Who hated me? King Koopa seemed like the obvious answer. Maybe the ghosts? When you're in a haunted castle that you found by the way of a haunted ship, a bloody-looking message isn't so unbelievable. I saw it again as I approached some giant boos. I was thankful that the blind boos ended at this point because the more I watched them shudder, the uneasier I felt, almost empathetic towards them. The thankfulness ended when I turned my back on the giant boos and this happened. Giant boos with faces I hadn't seen before. They always looked mad at being awakened, angry that you were invading their haunted houses across the Mario world. This was different. They looked gleeful, demented. I could see right down their throats, which was odd given the lack of detail their mouths usually displayed. And yes, of course, I'm going to address the message that you saw in the picture. Why won't you die? I don't know why. Am I supposed to? Who's asking? I let the giant boos touch me and they died like the bleeding bills, at which point I had encountered two. Despite any attempt to scare the player, I knew that being invincible meant invincible no matter what they threw at me. After a while of running down this strange claustrophobic hallway with no more eventful happenings, I came to a room with an exit pipe. Taking the pipe downward, I came out on the other end and dropped into a room filled with water. The water made sense, this being a sunken castle beneath a whirlpool and all. The first creatures I encountered in the underwater portion of the castle were thwomps. Unless you've been living under a rock since the mid-80s, you know thwomps are stone-like creatures that hang from the ceiling and fall whenever you come near. They try to crush you, essentially. Well, these thwomps lined up in a tight row, dropped repeatedly and randomly with no real trigger or sense of logic. They would just wait or drop whenever they seemed to feel like it. It almost looked like the thwomps had been successful. More cartoony blood. This was getting pretty unusual for the Mario franchise, which had never had blood in it. Now I'd seen it used 3 times, the bloody bills, the message, and the perpetually smashed, grinding thwomps who are working their victims into a pulp forever. The sight of them mindlessly crushing over and over again just made me hate them with an unsettling intensity. What's weird is that the blood caused Mario to slide as if it were an ice level. After walking through the gauntlet of depravity, I swam into a more open area that was filled with spikes on the floor and ceiling. It was difficult to swim in this manner without touching the spikes, but since I was invincible, it didn't matter much. I avoided them more for the fun out of any sense of being damaged. It stopped being fun real fast, though. Now I knew some of what was going on, the bloody mess the thwomps made. It was other Marios, past Marios, that had tried to traverse this level and failed. I had to admit this was an excellent touch, even though it was a bit ghoulish. Whoever designed the map actually broke the fourth wall and showed you the bloated, motionless abortions of the player's own careless treatments of Mario's tiny life. The bodies only floated straight up and down a bit, as if to show the effects of a light current. It was genius, and I couldn't believe I might be the first person to ever see this. I toyed with the idea of taking more than one screenshot I just presented to you, basically, so you could read this and enjoy the secret map as much as I had, especially this weird little touch, but without swimming or kicking or moving in any other way, the dead Marios started to come at me like torpedoes. Their faces remained blank, blue, and dead, but they moved with astounding speed. They angled and positioned and worked in all sorts of unique trajectories that left me almost nowhere to move. They continued coming at me and swarming and backing up to try again. I just couldn't bring myself to let them touch me. I moved with more speed and skill than I'd ever exerted, frantically trying to keep Mario free of the drowned victims that seemed dead set on rocketing towards him. When I finally reached the purple exit pipe you see above, there had to be 10 of those things right behind me, pitching and turning and chasing. I entered the pipe as fast as I could, and thankful that it worked properly, and Mario had been out of that situation in a heartbeat. The corridor that followed was empty, thankfully. It was just blue, underwater hallway that made no sorts of attempt to kill you. It was boring, predictable, like the game had been all these years. Brought back a sense of safety. At the end of the hallway, I came to a standard pair of doors you'd enter to face a final boss. Besides the doorway, a mushroom power-up. I didn't touch that shit. Going through the door was as you'd expect. The typical change of map views occurred, and Mario was standing ubiquitous bridge above boiling water. Or had it been blood all along? When Mario walked out onto the bridge, however, there was no boss creature. Instead, Mario looked immediately to the side and froze. I couldn't control him, he just stood there. Keep looking until you see it. I didn't notice it at first, so I don't expect you to notice it right away, but if you still haven't spotted it, look in the third window from the left. FYI, that's not usually there. Mario seemed to regain his composure and looked back and forth, surveying the room. There was still no boss, and I still couldn't control him, so I stopped trying and just watched. This went on and on for what seemed like forever. Nothing happened. Then a familiar face walked in from the right, dressed in green, tall and angry. It was Luigi. Mario recoiled in horror. It's difficult to say that without thinking how crazy it sounds, but Mario really reeled back in a sort of terror that was uncharacteristic for such a peppy, happy-go-lucky mascot like him. Then Luigi spoke. "You thought Koopa worked alone?" It was all connecting now, the messages scrawled on walls. "I hate you," and "Why won't you die?" Luigi. He'd always been Mario's second banana, the player too, the one who doesn't get the princess in these early games. No matter how identical he is to Mario in skill set and ability and tenaciousness and bravery, at the end of the day, the game is Super Mario Bros. He's just the brother. How he must have hated Mario, who among us wouldn't? Think about it, no matter what happens, Mario always comes back. No matter how many corpses he leaves littering the battlefield, he's always there to leap and cheer and get the adoration. And Koopa hadn't worked alone? I didn't know what that meant at first, if anything. But again, you just have to think it through. How exactly does King Koopa consistently succeed in kidnapping the princess? From day one, the original Mario Bros. Onward had always been an inside job. Still unable to control the character, I watched Mario simply cower in fear as Luigi leapt high into the air, as high as he could in Mario 2, the bastard child of the franchise. He jumped on the pathetic, weeping Mario again and again. I was powerless to stop it. When he was done, he seemed to look at Mario's limp body with this overwhelming rage. Then the bridge began to disappear. Soon Mario would be dead. As I looked, I had an irrational thought. Would it be permanent? Within an instant, Luigi turned to strike a victory pose like he'd beaten the level. Mario awkwardly got to his feet and took him by surprise. Fear and sadness and confusion had given way to anger. Mario overpowered his brother with little effort. To this day, I'm still haunted by the final result of his wrathful reprisal. "Oh God, no!" There was the map's title. None of this was a glitch, none of it was a mistake. It wasn't a developer getting back at Nintendo, and it wasn't a ghost haunting a cart. It was a planned, purposeful part of the Mario Brothers mythos, and if you beat the same level X numbers of times, a secret part of the world opened. And you learned that from Mario Brothers through Mario Land, Luigi had been secretly working against you and in fact had been facilitating the repeated abduction and abuse of the princess. But why? Money, power, no, it was all there. But it was because he wasn't the one in the spotlight, not being Mario himself. After Luigi died, well, and truly died, Mario just sat on the edge and wept. I was forced to watch this for minutes and minutes on end before the screen faded to black. I played the rest of the game through to see if anything had changed, and nothing else odd happened. As one would expect, since this whole ordeal was supposed to happen to be a part of the full story, I couldn't access the whirlpool again. I'd seen the events once, and that was all I was apparently allowed. It was back to the game as usual, so the same exact game I'd played since the 90s would probably continue to play for the rest of my days. Well, it was the same except for the final image. Now, you may be wondering, Sinclair, that just seems like a standard fucking creepypasta from back in the day, right? Well, if you go to the bottom of the web page, you'll see some author's notes. Trivia: I Hate You was written as a very early satire of a video game creepypasta, and then below the trivia section you'll see explaining/ruining the joke. I'll probably update this as time goes on, but off the top of my head here are a few stupid jokes and tropes in this story, which might be easy to miss in some cases. This section may or may not change your interpretation or enjoyment of the story, so proceed at your own risk. Haunted game stories usually insist on trying to convince the reader of the supernatural, however this story desperately wants to convince you of the opposite, and that nothing supernatural is happening. It has the opposite effect, ideally, and makes it less believable due to the assets/not being impossible, or even very likely at all. Casual, protracted opening, origins of passed down Nintendo, which is irrelevant, blood, more blood, additional blood, what if good character was evil, plot twist, random unnecessary character appearances that lend to nothing, to anything, mushroom, sky tree. Finding this totally real Easter egg takes way too much time and effort, so don't even try looking into it. It's not that I made it up, it's just that you won't find it because you never reach it, really. I ran for 10 minutes, outlandish timestamp. Numbers and screenshots are inconsistent despite through edits. Core premise of this is just Revenge of the Sith, similar to Jeff the Killer being the Dark Knight's Joker and so on. Gotta have the edgelord corrupted OC somewhere if we finally get him in the end screen. And like that, hopefully you all understand the meme, the joke, so to speak. I don't know, I just figured I'd make it explicit because throughout the years I always thought of it as like this serious attempt at a creepy story. It wasn't until I noticed that it was Slime Beast who wrote it where I was like, huh, that's weird. So I went to slimebeastswiki.com and reread the story, and at the end it shows the explaining the joke section. At first I thought it might have been an early attempt at a story, but no, it's just fucking Trollpasta. And with that context, it makes it a lot better because most of the criticisms I would have had for the story were to criticize the cliches, like, oh yeah, it's insisting that it's real, but no, it's all intentional. The only thing I'd criticize is that this is mostly plausible in my opinion with a Super Nintendo. Of course, there's some shit where it's like, okay, well, why would Nintendo make an impossible level to beat into their game? Like, that makes no sense. Oh god, they had Game Genie in mind when they designed it. That's stupid. But all the graphics and everything were plausible, at least to me. The most unrealistic part is how you get it, which, explained later in the story, is from playing a level so often, so many times, that it suddenly changes. Like, that just wouldn't happen. But, you know, for the most part, it's all plausible within the realm of Super Nintendo. With that said, I think I'm gonna head out. I've gotta go to work here in a bit, so you guys have a good one. One last thing, actually. This was a viewer-based poll because I put 4 creepypastas in my community tab and asked, which ones do you guys want to watch? My buddy happened to see the poll and he voted for I Hate You, which is why we got this. I figured I'd draw some attention to the polls because I intend to do them somewhat often, not all the time because I like to choose the stories I read, but if I can't decide, why not leave it up to the audience? With that being said, I think I'm done here. If you liked it, like the video. If you dislike it, send me a dislike. With that said, I'm out.